Hi, good morning and welcome to the Breakfast News on Rajya Sabha television, the perfect show to kickstart your bringing you the top national, international sports and business news. I'm Aishwarya Kapoor and here are this morning's headlines. India and Israel sign 7 agreements. Terrorism and development cooperation dominate agenda as Prime Minister Narendra Modi and Netanyahu pitch for increased people-to-people contact. Supreme Court asks Centre why no enabling law mandated under the Constitution framed for appointments to the Election Commission, says it may step in to lay down guidelines. Pakistan test fires a short-range surface-to-surface ballistic missile. Nasser claims it has poured cold water on Indian military's cold start doctrine. US says it will use considerable military forces on North Korea after its recent ballistic missile test. China and Russia call for double suspension. And India beat Sri Lanka by 16 runs in the Women's World Cup encounter in England, take a giant stride towards clinching a semi-final spot. Our top story this morning, India and Israel on Wednesday stepped up their bilateral relationship to a strategic format. Now, 7 important agreements were signed between the two countries after the conclusion of summit-level talks between Prime Minister Narendra Modi and Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. More details in this report.
India and Israel signed 7 agreements at summit-level talks between Prime Minister Narendra Modi and Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu on Wednesday. They include 3 agreements on space technology, 2 on water, 1 on innovation and 1 of Mashav, the Israeli Agency for International Development Cooperation. Terrorism, development cooperation and trade dominated the talks between the two leaders, who decided to make concerted efforts for increasing people-to-people contact.
India and Israel are changing our world and maybe changing parts of the world, because this is a cooperation. It's a marriage, really, made in heaven, but we're implementing it here on earth. We spoke about so many fields where we think we can make a big difference in water and agriculture and health, in every field.
I'm honored to be in Israel on this extraordinary visit. In our modern journey, our paths have been different, but our belief in democratic values and economic progress has been a shared pursuit. Visit is an occasion to rejuvenate the bonds of our friendship, to compose a new chapter in our ties, and to jointly venture toward new horizons of engagement.
Narendra Modi also called on Israeli President Reuven Rivlin and discussed ways to strengthen bilateral ties. He also pitched the centre's Make in India initiative with the president.
It is good and it is really a pleasure to have as a guest one of the greatest leaders of the world today, Prime Minister Modi. Welcome.
India का आई, Israel का आई. तो आई फॉर आई विथ आई, मैं समझता हूँ ये टेक्नोलॉजी पक्की मुझे नजर आ रही है. और जब हम लोग बोलते हैं इजराइल, तो हमारे लोगों का फीलिंग आता है इजराइल इज ए फ्रेंड, मींस ईच real fact is Israel.
On Tuesday, Prime Minister Netanyahu welcomed Prime Minister Modi to his residence in Jerusalem. During a joint news conference, both leaders talked about battling terrorism.
Yad Vashem tells us that those who believe in humanity and civilized values must come together and defeat it at all costs. As such, we must resolutely oppose the evils of terrorism, radicalism, end violence that plague our time.
But I have to say that we also face common challenges, and the first of it is to defeat the forces of terror that rampage through the world and threaten both our countries. So we must stand together in this battle, much as we work together to perfect the future.
This is the first visit ever by an Indian Prime Minister to Israel. Modi arrived in Tel Aviv on Tuesday for a 3-day visit. In an unprecedented gesture, Israeli Prime Minister and his entire cabinet accorded a special welcome by receiving Prime Minister Modi at the airport, an honor so far bestowed only on the US President and the Pope. Akhilesh Suman's report for Rajya Sabha TV.
Meanwhile, Prime Minister Narendra Modi also addressed the Indian diaspora in Tel Aviv on Wednesday night. Now, during the address, he announced that the people of Indian origin in Israel will get the Overseas Citizen of India cards, even if they have undergone the compulsory army service there. The Prime Minister also said that direct flights would be launched between Delhi, Mumbai and Tel Aviv to encourage people-to-people contact. He said an Indian cultural center would also be opened up in Israel, fulfilling a long-pending demand of the Indian diaspora. The event was also attended by Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu.
अब दिल्ली मुंबई तेल अवीव विमान सेवा शुरू कर दी जाएगी। भारतीय समुदाय के जिन लोगों ने इजराइल में कंपल्सरी आर्मी सर्विस की है, उन्हें भी अब से ओसीआई कार्ड मिल जाएगा। कंपल्सरी आर्मी सर्विस से जुड़े कुछ नियमों की वजह से आप अपने पीआई कार्ड को ओसीआई कार्ड में नहीं बदल पा रहे थे। इन नियमों को भी सरल करने का फैसला कर लिया गया है।
Prime Minister Modi and I have decided on a vast program to bring our partnership and our friendship to new heights. But we always remember that there is a human bridge between us. You. We admire you. We respect you. We love you.
And in what was an emotional meeting, Prime Minister Narendra Modi also took out time to meet baby Moshe, the Israeli boy who lost his parents in the 2008 Mumbai terror attacks. Now, Moshe Holzberg is now 11 years old and has been living in Israel with his grandparents. He met Prime Minister Modi along with the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Now, reports claim that the meeting was planned on a personal request by the Prime Minister, who wanted to meet the 26/11 survivor and his nanny, Sandra Samuels. Now, 53-year-old Samuels was granted honorary Israeli citizenship in 2008. She said that she frequently travels from her home in Jerusalem to visit Moshe and his grandparents. Now, Moshe will be visiting Chabad House in Mumbai after 2 years when he turns 13. And today, the Prime Minister will attend a technology exhibition and the CEO Business Roundtable in Tel Aviv. He will also interact with Indian students. Later in the day, he will leave for Germany to attend the G20 summit. Of course, that is one big story that we'll keep tracking through the day. Meanwhile, the Supreme Court on Wednesday sought to know from the centre, why was there no law according to the provisions in the Constitution to appoint the Chief Election Commissioner and election commissioners? The court, however, clarified that the election commissioners appointed so far have all been outstanding people of impeccable integrity.
अगर पार्लियामेंट ने इस पर कोई कानून नहीं बनाया है, जैसे कि सीबीआई के केस में या सीबीसी के केस में बनाया हुआ है या लोकपाल के केस में, तो फिर क्या कोर्ट सरकार को आदेश नहीं दे सकती कि भाई ऐसा एक इंडिपेंडेंट कमेटी के रिकमेंडेशन के आधार पर नियुक्ति करी जाए?
And in its response, the centre asked that when Parliament itself felt no need to enact a law, can the Supreme Court step into the legislative arena and set norms for it? The court explained that it considers the matter very important because election commissioners discharge a very important job of ensuring free and fair elections. Now, stating that it will decide on the issue after a detailed hearing, the apex court scheduled the case for hearing after 2 months. Now, constitutional experts feel that the selection process should be done by a panel like that for the CAG and the Chief Justice of India.
I don't think law is necessary because there is already a provision in the Constitution which says that the President shall appoint the Chief Election Commissioner and other commissioners. The procedure can be provided by executive order.
And now an update on the standoff between India and China. Well, China upped the ante on the Sikkim standoff on Wednesday, accusing India of trampling on the Panchsheel principles and asked New Delhi to pull back its troops as soon as possible. China also claimed that India was misleading the public by saying that Chinese troops are building a road in the Sikkim sector, which could endanger India's access to the northeastern states. China also said that it was weighing its options on travelling alert for citizens visiting India depending on the security situation. Meanwhile, the Chinese embassy in New Delhi said that Beijing was willing to discuss the possibility of alternative arrangements through other routes for Kailash Mansarovar pilgrims who had planned the journey via Nathula Pass. China had last week suspended the annual Hindu pilgrimage at the Nathula Pass in response to alleged intrusion of Indian troops into its territory. Meanwhile, scores of protesters held a demonstration in New Delhi to protest China's decision to block the entry of Indian pilgrims. The protesters burned photographs of the Chinese president and urged people to boycott the use of Chinese goods.
令人感到震惊的是，此次印军非法进入中印边界西金段已定边界中方一侧，性质非常严重。中方通过外交和边防会晤的渠道，向印方已经提出了严正的交涉。
And on to the situation in Darjeeling, where the Gorkha Janmukti Morcha supporters hurled petrol bombs at a Trinamool Congress party office. Now, the incident happened in the Kalimpong subdivision of Darjeeling district. Around 4 policemen were injured in the incident. The Morcha supporters also organized a rally shouting slogans in support of a separate state of Gorkha land. Now, internet services remain suspended for the 18th consecutive day. Police and security forces patrolled the streets of the hills and kept a tight vigil at the entry and exit routes. Now, except pharmacy, all the other shops, restaurants, hotels, schools and colleges remained closed. Darjeeling is witnessing unrest since 15th of June.
टीएमसी का पार्टी ऑफिस भी है, उसको बिडाल बिल्डिंग कहते हैं। वहाँ पर एक ग्रामीण बैंक भी है। वहाँ पर कुछ फोर्स भी उस इलाके में थी। पहले उस फोर्स को पत्थर बहुत मारे और उसके बाद नीचे उस बिल्डिंग में एक वाइन शॉप है और एक डीलर है वही एंड अदर जो उसका स्टॉकिस्ट टाइप का है, वहाँ उन्होंने आग लगा दी।
दार्जिलिंग हिल दिन पे दिन वहाँ की कानून व्यवस्था की हाल बदतर होते जा रहे हैं। आप थोड़ा ज़्यादा ध्यान दीजिए क्योंकि बगल में नेपाल है और चीन, इनका जो रवैया है ये रवैया को मद्देनजर दार्जिलिंग की जो हाल सुधरने के लिए आपकी तरफ से ज़्यादा कोशिश होना चाहिए।
And in Breakfast News, time for a very short break. We'll be right back with more news. Stay tuned.
The sacred relics of Buddha were unearthed in Piprava in Uttar Pradesh. Buddhist monks from all over the world visit the National Museum to pay their respects. These charred bone fragments of Buddha are housed in the gold canopy gifted by the royal family of Thailand.
Now an update on the GST, and the J&K Assembly on Wednesday adopted a resolution for implementing the GST in the state by voice vote amid protests by the National Conference and the Congress. Now, J&K was the only state left behind to implement the GST after all the other states did so on 1st of July. The resolution moved by State Finance Minister Sri Lanka had called for a presidential order to safeguard the special status and exclusive taxation powers of the state. Now, moving the resolution, he said that Article 370 of the Constitution is not compromised in any way through this presidential order. According to Drabu, the business activity in the state had dropped to almost 50% due to non-implementation of the GST after the new regime was rolled out in the rest of the country, causing losses to the state exchequer.
The inclusion of Jammu and Kashmir also under the GST umbrella, people of Jammu and Kashmir will also get benefits under the GST. And the economic integration of India is something for which Honorable Prime Minister Modi ji will be credited by generations to come.
मैं आवाम को अपील करूंगा, जम्मू और खासकर कश्मीर की आवाम को और लद्दाख के भाइयों को, कि ये देश के हित में हुआ है, एक गरीब आदमी की उन्नति के लिए हुआ है। जो रेवेन्यू बढ़ेगा हिंदुस्तान का वो सब गरीब लोगों के काम आएगा। और मैं अपील करता हूं अपनी व्यापार वर्ग को भी कि वो अपने आप को तैयार कर लें जीएसटी रेजीम में आने के लिए।
कोशिश है सेंटर की तरफ से, बाकी स्टेट्स के अपने जो है अधिकार हैं, उन अधिकारों को जो है प्रिजर्व करते हुए, प्रोटेक्ट करते हुए जो जीएसटी जो है लागू हुआ है, इससे आम आदमी को, कंज्यूमर को, हमारा ट्रेडर को, हमारा व्यापारी को, बाकी जो लोग हैं इंडस्ट्रियलिस्ट को जो है फायदा होगा। और इंडस्ट्रीज के जो कुछ जो है शक शोबे थे का नुकसान होगा, उसकी भरपाई भी केंद्र करेगा।
And in related news, the Union Home Ministry has given security clearance to the GSTN, the information technology backbone of the goods and services tax regime. The security clearance to the GSTN, not-for-profit private limited company, was delayed as the Home Ministry was examining threat perception to national security from any of the stakeholders. The need for getting security clearance arose as doubts were raised over the majority stake in the goods and services tax network, that is the GSTN, being held by private entities. Now, 5 private institutions have 51% equity in the GSTN. The central government has 24.5% equity in the GSTN, whereas state governments, 2 union territories and the empowered committee of the state finance ministers together hold another 24.5% stake in it. Meanwhile, the government has increased the number of consumer helplines on GST from 14 to 60, with specially trained professionals handling queries related to the new indirect tax regime. The contact number of the National Consumer Helpline is 14404. On to some other news, the 9th edition of the Delhi Dialogue on India-ASEAN ties concluded on Wednesday. In its address on the second and the final day of the dialogue, Ministry of External Affairs Secretary Preeti Saran said that India and ASEAN countries were actively engaged in negotiations for a regional comprehensive economic partnership agreement. She said that the negotiators will soon meet in Hyderabad to chalk out issues relating to telecom, health, transport and communications in a bid to tap the potential in these sectors. Now, laying stress on the cross-border trade and investment, Saran said that New Delhi was scaling new heights in its ties with ASEAN countries and was set for a defining partnership with the Southeast Asian multi-nation group. She said that India's trade with the ASEAN countries increased by $5 billion to $70 billion in the last 1 year. Saran also said that the government accorded the highest priority to cultural and people-to-people connectivity and hoped to deepen links through the development of commerce and academic exchanges. Now, Pakistan has successfully test-fired a short-range surface-to-surface ballistic missile, Nasr. Now, the chief of the armies in Pakistan said that the launch has put cold water on India's military's cold start doctrine. Now, cold start is a military doctrine developed by the Indian Armed Forces to use in a likely war with Pakistan. The Pakistani army also said that Nasr is a highly precision weapon system with the ability to be deployed quickly. The Pakistan Army has conducted a series of training launches as well as tests during the current week for validating the new technical parameters of Nasr with enhanced range from 60 to 70 kilometers and flight maneuverability. And days after North Korea carried out a long-range ballistic missile test, now United States has said that it will use its considerable military forces on North Korea if it must. However, experts say that US has limited military options to tackle the threat from Pyongyang without risking retaliation. Meanwhile, China and Russia have called for a double suspension, a plan that would not only see North Korea suspending its weapons testing, but also the United States and South Korea suspending their joint military exercises.
Make no mistake, North Korea's launch of an ICBM is a clear and sharp military escalation.
North Korea's recent successful launch of an intercontinental ballistic missile has revived talk of military intervention in the reclusive state. Describing the test as a sharp military escalation, the US threatened to use its considerable military forces on North Korea. At a United Nations Security Council meeting on North Korea's first ICBM launch, the US ambassador to the United Nations, Nikki Haley, also called for an escalated diplomatic and economic response against the Kim regime. She said US will table a new resolution against Pyongyang in days to come.
Their actions are quickly closing off the possibility of a diplomatic solution. The United States is prepared to use the full range of our capabilities to defend ourselves and our allies. One of our capabilities lies with our considerable military forces. We will use them if we must, but we prefer not to have to go in that direction.
US also warned other countries supporting North Korea of halting trade with them if they do not stop aiding the Pyongyang regime. Haley called out China specifically, noting that 90% of North Korea's trade is with China. This comes after US President Donald Trump also accused China of non-cooperation in dealing with the North Korean nuclear threat. He tweeted on Wednesday, "Trade between China and North Korea grew almost 40% in the first quarter. So much for China working with us, but we had to give it a try."
We will look at any country that chooses to do business with this outlaw regime. We will not have patience for stalling or talking our way down to a watered-down resolution.
Wednesday's UN Security Council meeting came in response to North Korea's first ICBM test, which US officials assess was a new kind of missile that had a range of about 5,500 kilometers, capable of hitting Alaska.
Nordkoreanische Regime seine völkerrechtswidrige Atom- und Raketenprogrammpolitik fortsetzt und dass wir natürlich im Zentrum unseres Gesprächs darüber reden werden, wie wir hier am besten reagieren, wie wir den Druck aufrechterhalten können.
도발을 멈추기 위해서 국제적으로 더욱 강도 높은 제재와 압박의 방안이 강구돼야 할 것 같습니다. 이번 G20 회의에서도 여러 정상들과 그 방안을 함께 논의하고 싶습니다.
While China issued a condemnation, it was also critical of the US and South Korea for deploying the THAAD anti-missile defense system. Russia said the possibility of using military measures should be excluded. It is noteworthy that both China and Russia are permanent members of the United Nations Security Council and could veto any resolution.
По информации Министерства обороны России, которая получена из объективного технического контроля систем наблюдения, установлено, что параметрические данные полета баллистической цели соответствуют тактико-техническим характеристикам.
我们同时呼吁有关各方保持克制，避免挑衅行动和好战言论，体现无条件对话意愿，共同为缓和紧张局势做出积极努力。
Despite US threatening North Korea with military action, experts concede that there was no option for military intervention in North Korea that would not cost civilian lives and carry a high risk of dangerous escalation.
I think we have to take a step back and understand there's no magic bullet to solving North Korea. It really is the ultimate Pandora's box. There's no very good military options here. Really what we need to do is we need to contain the problem. But beyond that, more than anything else, is you need to put sanctions in place that are tough enough that'll raise the cost of the North Korean nuclear missile programs to make it prohibitively difficult for them to keep building these type of weapons.
Tuesday's launch was North Korea's first ever test launch of an ICBM. State news agency quoted leader Kim Jong-un as saying that the test was a gift to the Americans on their Independence Day. After the latest launch, US President for the first time accepted that the North poses a real and present danger, not only to Northeast Asia and America's key allies, but to the US proper. Bureau Report, Rajya Sabha TV.
And on to sports, India took a giant stride towards clinching a semi-final spot with another convincing 16-run victory over Sri Lanka in a one-sided ICC Women's World Cup encounter in England. Mithali Raj and company recorded their fourth win on the trot as they defended a respectable 232 for 8 by restricting the island nation to 216 for 7. The Indians also maintained a clean slate against their subcontinental neighbours since the 2013 World Cup, having never lost a single ODI in all the meetings. That's it from me and my team in this edition of Breakfast News. Thanks for watching. Have a great day ahead.